Okay. Let's start maybe from the topic of user experience. In my slides and my presentations, I mentioned that yes, we have here in the CEE region the situation when mainly, the main part of the banks implemented the main scope of functionalities for the customers. Like all the usual daily operations which business customers are doing, they can do at least online. Maybe not on the mobile fully, but on the online for sure. And now, and this is, now the scope of functionalities is not a competitive advantage anymore. So this moves to the non-banking services, to the integration of the non-banking services, and also to the user experience, to the design, to the customer experience when they use this platform. This becoming a real advantage. So my question first, Andras, to you, and then Maciej to you as well. So first of all, how do you see this, the best, let's say, design for business customers, if you talk about digital banking? And also, the second question, well, how to measure this influence, because you are specializing on this. We don't do the UX analysis in our studies, only the functionalities. So how to analyze this impact on the user experience to the profits, let's say?
Yeah, I think regarding user experience, what will be a change in the upcoming periods that especially small businesses, they will be less tolerant for mistakes regarding the user experience. So I think that since there are already options like Revolut Business, Wise, and so on, so if the banks, they make mistakes, it's much easier to switch, especially if they do international business and they understand the benefit, for example, to have multi-currency accounts. So in this respect, I think ease of use will have a big impact, what we can expect from them. And regarding functionality, I think it will be that kind of move that banks dealing with business banking, they will start to specialize. So they will start to serve some segments with better experience and features. What is for that segment is important. So, for example, Swedbank is doing it, that they launched the application, it's called Unko, and it's focusing on really small solo entrepreneurs to targeting that segment and serve them the best.
What is do you have in mind kind of the best example, in your opinion, of the user experience in business banking?
It's hard to say that, like, what is the best experience, because usually in retail it's relatively easy. You have to check the neobanks, and usually they are providing the best user experience. I think in this respect, there are some initiatives like Judo Bank in Australia, and there are some banks or neobanks appearing on that field, but it's not that solid as in the retail banking area. So, for example, Wise Business and Revolut Business is much weaker solution compared to the retail solution what they are providing. But on the other hand, they can afford this luxury to provide mediocre product to challenge the standard traditional banks, because the traditional banks, they provide very weak solutions in this space. So it's very hard to point out that this or that bank is doing well at the moment. Just we feel the pressure that it's growing, so we know a lot that there are a lot of banks who are working on to deliver a better experience, but usually it takes several years for them to develop that. So we know that they are working on that, but it's not visible yet.
Yeah.
It's usually the thing, right? When you are approaching things with a design thinking approach, you first need to conceptualize, you then need to code, right? It takes a lot of time. And we see many banks that are actually adapting, trying to adapt to this. But this is the natural area where fintechs were dominating, right? This is how they were able to grab part of the market share. Like, for example, Karol was talking about Apfino that we brought up and that we provided for the SME clients in order for them to be able to get financing more easily, right? It was easier from our perspective as a technological company to provide such a portal than, for example, to revolutionize the whole bank in order to provide such kind of a service. But we will see, right? The banks are adapting. They are adapting more and more quickly. We see banks like, for example, Joanna's ING, right? They are doing a very good job at that. BNP is also doing a great job at that. And the experience that we have in SME and even in corporate banking, right, which is more complex, it always, there's this clash, right? You have this user experience that needs to be nice and easy for clients of services such as Facebook who are used to great user experience, but at the same time you need to provide a lot of security. And this security needs to be embedded in a seamless way, like things like approval workflows, like different kinds of authorization devices, right? All of it needs to work smoothly in order for the banks to be able to distinguish themselves in the area of user experience, right?
Maciej, about your presentation, what does it take from the bank to implement microservices architecture? I mean, we saw that BNP, it took 3 years for BNP, but in general, even in sense of resources, what does it take?
Yeah, generally, when we are talking about microservice implementation, first of all, it takes the mindset, right? You need to, you need to play the corporate bingo. You need to get the attention of CEO, CFO, CEO, all of them. You need to get the attention from the board. Otherwise, the change that we are talking about is just not happening because it needs to go from the top. So after you have the, let's say, the mandate from the top that they will be transforming, they want to do it, they do not have to do it like all at once, right? It doesn't need to be big bang. With BNP, the approach that was taken was actually to do it step by step. So it was done gradually. Different areas were converted, right? Different modules were separated from the platform. And clients always had an option of switching between the old system and the new system. So again, this relates, I think, to the user experience question that we asked before, right? The user experience needs to be smooth. It has to keep the clients comfortable during the whole process. So what I advocate usually is this kind of gradual approach, where you start with something small. You start, let's say, with one microservice, one team, and then as you see the benefits, you start spinning up, you start giving the teams more power, giving more responsibilities, essentially transforming the whole way. Right?
I have actually 2 questions to you, but first of all, let me ask whether we have questions here in the room. At the moment, no. Okay. The question of composable banking, as you were saying, and the smoothless user experience in digital business banking, for me is also partially connected with the banking ecosystems and also with the thing that, for example, new functions or non-banking, beyond banking functions that are implemented by the banks right now, usually they are done not within an ecosystem, I would say, but very often on a separate portal or separate website of the customer. It could be connected with the online banking, not always the case, but could be. But in general, if a business customer uses several products from the bank or from the connected companies, so usually this is several websites. So you have online banking, you have a separate invoicing and accounting, you have a separate factoring platform, you have a separate leasing platform. And it is really, from the sense of user experience, it's not so good. Because from the one side, as I mentioned, yes, first of all, it's good to have these functions really digitally. You shouldn't go anywhere if you don't want to visit the branch or even call somebody. But still, when you really have to remember your logins and password to the 4 or 5 portals to use all the banking services, this is becoming difficult.
Yeah, this is definitely cumbersome, right? If you have to remember all of those logins, even if you are just interacting with the same institution. So there are 2 aspects to this, I would say, to this portalization, right? Because usually what happens is when such portals are incorporated, they are either bought as off-the-shelf solution that is not integrated, or it's just so difficult to integrate with the bank's legacy infrastructure. So that's why when we are discussing, right, the implementations of such modular composable architectures, it is all about APIs, because APIs is what enables you to exchange data between the systems freely, and then they can communicate, and on top of those API-based processes, you can actually provide great user experience. So I guess that this is the fundamental building block that is required, and it not only allows banks to build such portals that would integrate, that would be completely immersive to the user, but it also allows banks to expose those APIs to third parties. And by exposing the third parties, they are essentially enabling embedded finance, which can be happening in ERP systems or any other types of solutions.
How do you forecast? How long will it take this second wave of digital transformation, as you mentioned, in our region?
Oh, well, yeah. So it will take some time, right? We are just finishing the first wave. We see that Europe is actually not that bad of a place because there are places in the world where banking was not so advanced. They, in a sense, they are more lucky because they get to skip the first wave. But at the same time, it's much more complex for them to even grasp this mentality that systems can be integrated so well that you can have such a good user experience. So I think that in Europe, we are quite privileged. It will take, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years to fully adopt this.
5 to 10 years. Okay, not so fast.
It depends on the decisiveness, right?
I think also like probably each individual bank should make a decision that on which area they are focusing on, because basically like there are several parts what could be improved, but it takes too much energy even from the biggest banks. So I think other banks should focus on that to provide the basic functionality in a very effective way and with the best UX and adding just little functionality, or they can focus on integrating more services. So for example, invoicing is getting more and more included. Though on the other hand, for example, contracting is quite much behind. So I think that like for business automation, it's quite important to have banking, invoicing, and contracting.
Exactly.
And usually that lag is completely missing at most of the banks. Not just thinking about that like kind of data or document repository, but even like including smart contracts and getting ready for CBDC and so on and so on. And I don't think that a bank can handle all of these things at once. So you really have to prioritize that based on your client base, where you want to position yourself in the market.
And what is your advice? From what is this better to start? What would you suggest?
I think it really depends to understand the local market, because I think every country is different, and to watch what the others are doing. I think first step is to have at least kind of standard hygienical UX. So because if you don't fix this, even if you're extending more and more services, it gets very clunky. But to be very, very good, or to have more embedded finance in your offering, I think it's really a decision that you have to check your competitors and market what can give you an advantage. Because I think every country is different in that respect.
Yes, sometimes the decision is even taken out of your hands, like with PSD2, right? The banks just have to adopt APIs. In countries where, for example, the electronic exchange of invoices is prevalent or mandated by the government, like in the Nordics, right? You would see much faster adoption rate, right? This is it. You just have to do it. Otherwise, right, it's just on business priorities, where you can make the most money, maybe from connecting banking with factoring, where clients can see the invoices. They can either repay them from digital banking, or they can request financing from a partner. Why not?
Yeah, but again, it should be implemented, as you said, with the user experience taken into account. Because, I don't know, having an experience of using key invoicing when you upload your cost invoice and OCR doesn't read very good the invoice, and you like should manually correct everything. It takes several hours of your time.
It cannot be painful, right?
So
if it's painful, you're just going to abandon it. So.
Yes, so it should be implemented with the better user experience at once. Okay, whether some questions appeared in the room? Okay, then before we start, actually, our next panel will be devoted to the open banking and interoperability. And before we switch to that panel, then there will be a final question from my side to both of you. This is actually, questions containing two parts. First of all, what is... So as I mentioned, that banks starting thinking and moving their priority to the development of the mobile banking channels for business customers here in the region, and also taking into account the solutions that already we have in the region for the online banking. So I would like to hear from you the tips and suggestions. What is the better user experience? What is the best user experience for the business customer in mobile banking? Because why? Everybody, I mean the user, the owners and the employees of the business customer, the users, individual users, right, of all the banking and fintech applications. And they started to expect this experience, right, the same experience, not the worst one, when using the business banking applications. How to do this? And how fast it can be done?
I think, first of all, it's quite important to understand that SME banking and corporate banking are quite different things. So if you can't separate and you have clients from both of the bases, basically if you're providing the same experience for them, it's already, you fail. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing when many banks, they were providing a retail experience for SME clients that was not working out as well. So you have to focus on that. Then I think it's quite important to prioritize the functionalities. So to focus on functions, what they have the highest impact on the opinion of the users. So for example, if you like payment and approval, it's a quite critical process, and it should be much smoother than features what they don't use quite often. And I think some banks are already experimenting with voice and chat solutions. I think it would have a big impact because in some cases, voice is 3 times faster than typing and manipulating, and for some business users, it would be very effective in those cases when they cannot use their hands. Yeah. For example, they are driving or something.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think that in case, right, if you want to provide this great experience in SME banking, you need to differentiate yourself somehow on the market. And what I'm thinking right now is that banks should be developing those like halo processes, right? This is something that usually fintechs do. A halo process like a halo car, right? Ford, for example, makes Fiesta, but it also makes GT40, which is basically a race car. And this is something that drives customers to the showrooms. And if a bank would be able to develop such a halo process, like, for example, you just point at an invoice, it's scanned and it's completely directed to the workflow that will process it and provide, for example, some financing, this would be a great idea, right? This is something that is truly unique on the market, something that will allow you to distinguish yourselves. Usually it's the fintechs that propose such solutions, but why not a bank?
Okay, thank you very much. Maciej, Andras, thank you very much for the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Děkuji pěkně.